Kia ora koutou, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for this Facebook Live tonight. I am beaming in to share more about Tiny Nation, our people, our passion, and our purpose, and just to take anyone who's interested through a really quick info session to share a little bit more, not only about Tiny Nation, but about home-based early childhood education and care and what it's actually all about, how it's different in terms of the sector model, and what you can expect from a home-based early learning service like Tiny Nation. So if you're a family or an educator tuning in to hear a little bit more, then haere mai and welcome, and let's go. I'm really happy to answer any questions as we move through, and just flick any comments in the comments box, and if I don't get to them as we move through, I'll hopefully get to them at the end. So what I've done is I've just got a few slides to help keep me on track, because I can sometimes veer off a little bit, and we'll kick things off. Alrighty, I wanted to start just by sharing with you all a little bit more about our why. And we talk about our why a lot at Tiny Nation, our kaupapa, our reason for being here. And it's pretty purposeful, right? Because we're all in early childhood education to make a difference. And for us, that's really powerful. So personally, for me, Tiny Nation was founded 3 years ago, and our why in founding it was being parents ourselves of young children and having used home-based early learning and care. One of the big things that we wanted to make sure was that home-based was continued to be supported and funded well into the future for parents looking for this kind of model, because we could see all of the benefits of having our children in nurturing, familiar environments with secure attachment relationships with educators and teachers that they could really trust and form strong, secure attachments to. So that was a big part of the why for me as a working mum, and obviously a big part of getting over that initial mum guilt of going back to work, thinking about what I was going to do in terms of childcare. But for me, the question was so much bigger than where my child would go. It was more about who my child would be with. And the person became the thing that I was so focused on searching for, as opposed to the place. And I think that sometimes as parents, we can get caught in that trap of being attracted to the new thing on the block in terms of the latest childcare centre with all of the, beautiful resources and the new builds and all of that kind of thing. But for me, it was about looking for a nurturing, familiar space, not just for my children, but for me to feel like I could belong to and be a part of, and to really establish that village around my whānau that would be there to provide support during those times of need. And that's what we found tenfold using home-based. And that was a big part of my why personally when it came to founding Tiny Nation. What I wanted to do was look at how we could create a really unique and special model for home-based that celebrated everything amazing that makes it what it is, but supported qualified educators to deliver high quality service to families and to deliver really special care moments for our children. So for us, it was really about professionalizing the sector and coming in and really showcasing all that is wonderful about home-based. And if you can see these pictures to the side, these are my 3 children, Jack, Gus, and Ella. So we're 9, 7, and 18 months old now. So we're still very much in the forefront of Tiny Nation as a family, experiencing it as a family. And all of those things. So that's a really important part of our why, and being parents ourselves as an entire leadership team. That's really driven a lot of our decisions around how we deliver a service, not only to our families, but to our educators, who are kind of the central part of our model. And we believe if we can create wonderful opportunities for our educators and wonderful environments full of connections for our educators, then that will translate into the experience that our children have as a part of our Tiny Nation service. In terms of home-based early childhood care and education, one thing that often gets me is how many people don't actually know about it and don't understand it much as a choice when it comes to when it comes to an option for our children and for mums and dads looking to return to work or looking for care for their young ones. It's when you think about it, it's actually probably pretty understandable, given home-based represents less than 10% of the early learning sector in New Zealand. So it's still very much a minority in that space. But it also represents the fastest growing model in early childhood education. So what we've seen is rapid growth as more and more families begin to understand the benefits of home-based early learning and cotton on to exactly what's happening in the brains of our children in those early days, particularly in the first 1,000 days, and how they're wiring up and what's important when it comes to creating those solid foundations from which they're going to grow and establish themselves in our communities and throughout their whole lives. So we have seen rapid growth in home-based. Generally, it's an educator working from their own home, caring for up to 4 preschool children at a time. So this is the beauty of it, right? That they have this low ratio that you just never see in a centre-based alternative. And they get to be 1 to 4. A lot of our educators are actually less and choose to work, 1 to 3 children even. And no more than 2 under 2, which is another really big quality metric when it comes to early learning experiences, is if a child is under 2, what is that ratio in terms of care? How many other children is that adult caring for? And like I said earlier, the big part for me in terms of my why was, who is the person I'm leaving my child with? Not where is the place or what is the place. I was wanting to find the special person that I knew would connect with both my child and me and my family. So that is a winner when it comes to home-based, because you always have these beautiful small relationships and communities of care. So educators work from their own home, or you can choose to employ a nanny who works from the home of the family and is obviously dedicated to the care needs of that particular family, or a nanny share, which is probably a more recent evolution of the nanny model to cater for families who want to maybe come together, friend groups or community groups, and share the cost of a nanny and have the benefit of having a nanny in the home as well. So there's a few different forms that home-based care can take. The educator model, working from their own home, is the most common. And like I say, there are so many benefits attached not only to the small ratios, but also the small group care, because when you're a preschooler, you actually can't cope with a huge amount of sensory overload and different people coming and going. So that ability to be able to latch on and attach to core people becomes really important, because it becomes the lens through which you see the world in terms of those relationships that you're forming. And that is one of the key benefits of home-based as well. You also get that nurturing, familiar environment, the home environment, the way traditional care has always probably been intended, where we go back to the community. And I know many of us growing up probably experienced that as well before it became a formal model, funded model of care was, going to a neighbour down the street who already knew your family and already knew you, and you connected with really regularly, and that became a care option for families. And it's really just taking that and planting it in today's day and age, and being able to obviously support families to access it. So it is a ministry funded service type, which means that families qualify for 20 hours and other subsidies, including WIN subsidies, if they're choosing to access home-based, in exactly the same way that they would qualify if they were looking at centre-based services or other options. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, a lot of our philosophy at Tiny Nation, and I guess home-based in general, is built around what we know happens in the brain with our preschoolers, particularly, like I say, in those first 1,000 days, which is from date of conception up until roughly the second birthday. And that's when we know, if you can see these, pointing to the wrong way, if you can see these slides, you'll see that this is actually a picture of the brain, and of the connections that are forming in the brain. And I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. And you'll see here, you've got the connections at a newborn age, moving to 1 month, 9 months, 2 years, and then as an adult. Now, they say that obviously when you're born with very, very few connections or neural pathways, and neurons are what build our brain and build our connections, and I guess our way of life and our experiences of life are all critical to how those neurons are wiring and firing. So when you look at those, brain maps, essentially what you see is that a huge amount of those neural pathways are created in those first 2 years of life. When a child is born, they are born with, more than 70% of their brain left to develop, and about 90% of that is done in the first 3 years of life. So, it's really critical to be making the right kinds of decisions when it comes to those relationships and those early experiences, because they lay a foundation of success for the later years. And some of you might have come across Nathan Wallace and the work that he does with the developing brain and supporting communities to understand it. And he often talks about how, as parents, we place a lot of importance on the schools that our children go to, particularly like the high schools. And often that's where a lot of families will choose to spend their money or invest, huge amounts of time. And it's actually in the early, most formative years that those decisions have the most impact, because of the way the brain is wiring up, and because you can have so much control over those early experiences. So I really love this slide, because these visual maps of the brain kind of show it all. When you look at that slide of the 2-year-old brain versus the adult brain, there's not a huge amount of difference in terms of the amount of neural connections that are happening there, bearing in mind that we go through a pruning process, and the brain is always, very movable and shapeable, and there is a huge amount of plasticity there. What we do see is those first 3 years of life are the years where it's really critical to be setting our children up for success. And a huge part of that is obviously their relationships, and that is why that connection and that one-on-one attention and support is so important. Kimberly Crisp, one of our Tiny Nation partners and a woman we greatly admire in the early childhood education space, launched us here in Hawke's Bay 3 years ago. And this was one of her slides, which I just thought was so powerful. She refers to the Tina Turner song, "What's Love Got to Do with It?" And her answer is simply everything. It's got everything to do with it. And as parents, that's what we want to know, right? When we're leaving our children, is that we're leaving them with someone that not only we trust, but that we know will love them just like we will, and take care of them just like we will. And I love this quote, because I feel like it kind of sums it up from a child's perspective, in terms of the way they view the world and they view their carers. Do you love me no matter what? Can I trust you? Will you be there? Can I turn to you when I'm afraid? Do you see me? And I feel like those questions are really powerful. And if we step into look at it through the lens of a child, those are the questions they're pondering when they first meet an adult that's coming into their life, and kind of pursuing that relationship with them, and getting that right is so key. And I see it with my own children, with the educators that they've had, and that unbreakable bond, and how they become an instant part of your whānau. And families often talk to me about, how do you know when you've got the right person? Because you could go and visit a number of different people, a number of different services and centres, and try and figure out, where's the best place for my child. And my answer is, you instinctively know when you meet that person. You just know, because they get you and they get your child at that level that you need, and they see you. And I think that's a really big part of it, and that values alignment. And that's the beauty of home-based care, is that you're choosing the person. You're not choosing the place. You're choosing the person. And how awesome is that as a parent, to know that you have that choice, and that you can choose someone who you know is going to instinctively love and care for your child just like you will. To see and to be seen, that is the truest nature of love, and such a connector in terms of that one-on-one relationship. One of the big things, and there might be some early childhood teachers watching this who are currently working in centre-based services thinking, I'm tossing with the idea of becoming an educator and launching my own home-based service. what are you waiting for? But essentially what we want to do is partner with our educators and our teachers to walk alongside the families and the children that they care for. And some of the feedback we get in terms of testimonials from them is absolutely incredible. When they go, home-based is amazing because I finally get to follow the child, I get to follow their lead and follow their interests, and it's genuinely child-led. It's not, it's not crowd control. It's not me being pushed beyond my limits. I can just tune in and be with and be present. And that's one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we get from educators who are starting out in their role is just what a joy it is to be able to have those low ratios and be able to really tune into each child and their needs and build those relationships, not just with the child, but with their family as well. Watch carefully the magic that occurs when you give a person just enough comfort to be themselves. And I think that is kind of sums it up in a nutshell. And I really love this quote because what we all want for our children is for them to just be able to be authentically who they are. And the space and the time that home-based gives them to allow them to grow into that space is beautiful to watch because instinctively that they can be who they are, that they've got the space to be able to do that they've got someone in relationship with them to support that, and that they can slowly build that group of peers and also experience larger group-based care models through some of our many outings and events and pods with other educators and different things. So it's still not limited to small group-based care, even as they get older. And the opportunities to go out into the community, to be able to be a part of the community and access it just like you would as an adult is magic for children, to be able to go to the libraries and the supermarkets and the parks and really experience nature authentically. That's huge. And obviously, like I would hope all early childhood education and care services, play is a huge part of our philosophy in terms of the way that we learn, and learning how to learn through play is a big part of it too. So we use play a lot to help support our children to manage their emotions, to relax, to forget about their worries. It's been quite a big part of our model in these post-pandemic times and post-COVID times as we try and return to some normality. But play is an amazing way for children to communicate and to share what's on their mind and what they're going through. And our program is very much play-led in that respect. I'm just going to quickly take you through some of our core values. These are our guiding values that really form a huge part of who we are and why we're here. And authenticity, we call them the ABCs, which is quite easy to remember, but authenticity is a big one for us. This for us means being real and accountable, and it kind of translates not just into the environment, which obviously we always want to be authentic because it's such a huge part of home-based, and it's a real defining factor of what it's about, being able to be authentically here in the community and experience those things and not be behind four walls all the time, but being able to get out and about. But more than that, it means being able to actually really show up for our educators and our children and our families in ways that are important. So we will always advocate in that space for our community, and we see that as a really big job and a really big responsibility when it comes to the sector and when it comes to growing home-based. We want to be authentic in the way that we are, because we know that then we're truly showcasing the best of home-based. And we are able to walk in partnership with others to make great things happen for children and families. Belonging is a huge one for us, and like I mentioned earlier, just connecting up that village and providing that village of support, not just to our families, but also to our educators, in a role that can be sometimes quite isolating because you're working from home on your own with children. We create a lot of opportunities for connection, and that's a big part of our philosophy on a day-to-day basis. Just affirming people's identity. We want to create a tribe of like-minded people, and that's been a vision for us us right from the start. I'm really proud of the group of educators and the team that we have on board at Tiny Nation. All reflect these values and really live into them themselves and want to be a part of something bigger and want to be a part of something special. And that's a big part of that belonging for us, is making sure that everyone feels included and is a part of the movement and is a part of the work that we're doing in Homebase to raise the bar and to raise awareness around who we are and why we're here. And communication. This is a biggie for me personally. I've actually got a background in communication, and it's always been a passion of mine, just to make sure that we are modelling for our children, especially, what respectful, reciprocal, and responsive communication looks like. And that very much goes back to how we're communicating with our families and with our educators, and how we're listening, not just how we're talking and sharing, but how we're taking on feedback. And taking on feedback really informs our Tiny Nation program on a term-by-term basis. We're always seeking feedback from educators and family, using it to create better opportunities for them and for our children. So we're very much driven from the inside out in that respect. Here's a little slide in terms of where we are on a national scale. And you can see from here that we're actually in most regions now, which is hugely exciting given we are 3 years young, and we've really hit the ground running. When we set up Tiny Nation, we knew that we wanted to work with qualified educators and really have strong indicators of quality. So we knew in an industry back 3 years ago with 70% untrained educators, we were going to be tapping into a much smaller market because we were choosing solely to work with qualified educators. We believe it's a really core aspect of quality and what quality looks like. And it's a key point of difference for us. We're the only national home-based early learning provider in the country that chooses quality and chooses to work solely with qualified educators and teachers. So that's a big part of who we are and a big part of our day-to-day mahi. So our regions are probably more boutique in that respect, because of our stance on quality. But we've also built a reputation in these regions now as that provider, which is really heartening. And we are getting family inquiry come through all the time because they know that about us, and that is why they choose us. And I think that is a big part of the work we have to do in our industry, as the government has kind of shared with their early learning strategic plan and their home-based review, is professionalising the work that we do and celebrating these qualifications and lifting the bar when it comes to what we expect in home-based services, because when we get it right, it's just total magic. One of the big things I just wanted to mention here is, while we have obviously a national coverage, we also are very much regionally based. So while we are a national organisation and our HQ is actually in Hawke's Bay, we have local visiting teachers in every region who run programs in that region and have regular outings and events on a weekly basis, who understand the uniqueness of their whenua, of their land, and understand what they can access, how to create special opportunities for educators and children that are specific to their region, and to everything that's on offer there. So that's a big part of our program, is making sure that, we are in each region at grassroots level, really working alongside educators and families to meet the needs of that region. How we look after educators and families, well, as I've mentioned earlier, we have a real educator-centric model, because we believe that if we look after our educators, in turn our families and our children will feel that love and that aroha, and that will flow through. So in order to give children our best, we have to be at our best, and we get that. As parents, we get that, and we know what it looks like sometimes when we're not at our best. So what makes us different? I've talked about professionalising home-based and showcasing quality, which is, a huge focus for us. We're small in size, but we're big in heart, and we are personal. We have a head office here in Hawke's Bay, but we are regularly out in our communities, I've personally met most of our educators. We work really closely with our community to make sure that we're walking the talk when it comes to living into some of these big visions and values. We do have an education and training focus, so it's another part of our philosophy, and we do offer our educators an annual budget around professional learning and development so that they can further themselves, but look to further themselves in areas that they're passionate about or want to explore more, or that are unique to their own program or philosophy. So it gives educators a lot of choice in terms of what they might like to access. We regularly offer professional learning and development opportunities online and face-to-face as well. We also offer relief and emergency care options, because we get that with home-based, it can be quite tricky to navigate, not just as a family when from time to time things happen and educators might be unavailable, but also as an educator from time to time when things pop up. And we do have the added benefit in most of our regions of having visiting teachers on the spot who can come in and support with that, and provide that continuity of program, or educator buddies who are able to kind of self-refer within groups, so that we can make sure that those relief and emergency care options are there for both families and educators. We also have really strong industry partnerships. Partnerships is a key principle for us, because we really want to work in partnership with the sector, not in competition with the sector. We want to grow home-based for the good of growing home-based. And so we have a lot of partnerships, not just with other like-minded home-based providers, but also sector-wide with experts in their own field. And we tap into those partnerships a lot when it comes to delivering professional learning and development for our educators, and making sure that our knowledge and our practice is always really current when it comes to the delivery of program of Te Whāriki, the early childhood education curriculum, and of any other key learning priorities that we might be focusing on from time to time. So we benefit from those partnerships in a lot of different ways, and there's a real richness to the delivery of program when you're able to bring in people who have very specialised knowledge and passions in their own areas. And obviously community program I've talked about plays a huge part for us. We're big believers in community and fostering that sense of belonging, which is a core value for us. So we always have a lot happening in each of our regions for our educators and whānau to tap into and be a part of. And those connections are really important for us, because it's also an opportunity for us to connect with our community too. Innovative technology is something I haven't yet talked about, and I'm going to talk about that now. We do have an electronic sign in and out for our families and educators, and this slide just gives you a little bit of an overview of what that looks like. So essentially we set up every new educator with a tablet. That tablet is used for our electronic sign in and out for families on a day-to-day basis. Again, another way to professionalise the service that we're offering, to ensure that we've always got those health and safety metrics in play, that we've got plans around anything that might happen in case of an emergency, and all of those enrolment details in terms of sign in and out comes through to our HQ here in Hawke's Bay. So we know that if anything ever happened, we've got all of those details, and we can support educators and know exactly who's in their care at any given point in time. It, for us, was a far better option than a paper-based option where, only the educator and the family are aware sometimes of what's going on if things have changed or children are away or sick. So for us, this is quite innovative in that it's real time, and we can see as soon as children have signed in and signed out. There's also a whole lot of other functionality that's included here in terms of what we call the daily needs. Children's eating, sleeping, toileting, all of the things that as parents sometimes it's quite nice to know a little bit about what's going on a day-to-day basis, and their routines, just their general routines while they're in care. So all of that can be shared electronically, can be monitored that way, and we have options for both. So we do have paper-based options for those educators and families that prefer that, but we love our electronic options as well. And while we're on that, we also have a Tiny Nation app, and this is a a centralized point for us. We direct all of our educators and families here, and it's just a really nice comms platform that shares our policies, our forms, any news, updates, alerts, things that we've got happening in terms of community program are all fed through the app. And it's just an app that you can download on your phone. And then you have instant access to all things Tiny Nation. So we think that's a pretty special part of our service as well, because it enables all of our community to access everything at any time and on the go, which is becoming increasingly important for people now, rather than having paper-based things gathering dust somewhere on the bedside table. And obviously, you know, the biggest part of why we're here is to be of service to our educators and our nannies, so that they can be of service to the families that entrust their children into our care and into the Tiny and enroll in the Tiny Nation program. So that is a little whiz-bang tour of Tiny Nation, a bit of an info session on our why, our people, our passion and our purpose. Like I say, we talk about our why all the time. It's a driving force for why we're here. And in a sector that seems to be a little bit in disarray at the moment in terms of crisis and where to next and what's happening next, I feel like we've really anchored ourselves in our values, and that's provided a really clear way for us to forge ahead. We really want to embrace the traditional aspects of what we do in terms of early learning. And I've just been out on the road visiting each of our regions as a part of our third birthday roadshow, and it's just been incredibly special to see for myself all of these beautiful relationships that are forming between children and educators and visiting teachers, educators and families, and the genuine difference that it is making in the lives of these families and these children and in these communities. And it's something really special to witness when you see that relationship. And I know many of you watching have probably had that at some point as well. And as a parent, for me, you know, there's nothing more you can ask of than that your child has been loved and cared for in that way. And so, like I say, for us, it's a no-brainer to build home-based, to build awareness of home-based, to be able to share more information around why home-based is such an important option for families to have, the flexibility it provides in terms of care, the village it creates for families who need some more ongoing support, and just the unique space it provides for every child to be authentically who they are and grow into the best version of themselves. That's why we're all here, and I'm happy to answer any questions or share anything more for anyone who might want to get in touch. You can contact us on 0800 Tiny Nation. You can flick us an email at info@tinynation.co.nz, or you can just visit our website, tinynation.co.nz, and there's a contact us form there too. We would love to hear from you if you are thinking a little bit more about engaging with home-based care, either as a family or an educator, and we'd love to share a little bit more about what we do with you if that's the case. So please feel free to get in touch. Thank you so much for those of you who've tuned in tonight to hear a little bit more about who we are and why we're here. And ka kite, I'll say good night. Thank you.